Alright, we're here. I was just talking to Teresa, and I was mentioning to her my little impromptu interview with Mike about how he said he saw like a cowboy looking at him in a dream he had, and you said that you've seen something similar, so I wanted to get this on videotape.
Okay,
so we can, have it for record.
When Matt was telling me what Mike had told him, it just really freaked me out, brought back a lot of memories, because when I was a young girl, probably maybe 10 years old, my grandfather lived in Kentucky, and out in the boonies, pretty much in Nowheresville. And I remember me and my nephew and some of my cousins, we were playing one day, and I happened to look up, and across the creek on the other side of the road from where my grandfather lived, in the trees there, I thought I saw a man. Well, we stopped, and I asked the other kids, and it was a man. We could see him way, way far away from us. He was very tall, thin man, had on a cowboy hat, and just stood and stared at us. So we ran back, of course, and told our parents. And my mom said that, yeah, he had been, seen. He was a weird man. Boys would sometimes, go out and disappear. And when their families went out to, try to find them, they would be hung upside down on picket fences by their cuffs of their pants. And it used to happen all the time. And these boys would say that it was a tall, thin man who didn't speak that wore a cowboy hat. So it kind of reminded me of this, because he's just this dark, kind of eerie shadow of a person. It almost makes you feel like when you see him that he's not real. But I had that encounter when I was, like I said, right around 10. And then later in life, a couple other times during my life, I've seen the figure again. Once was shortly after my brother had died, and I was still living with my mom and dad, and one night I had heard footsteps in my brother's room, and it kind of really freaked me out, so I slept downstairs for a few nights, and while I was sleeping downstairs, I woke in the middle of the night after hearing something, and saw this man, and it was the same man I remember from childhood, coming down the staircase. And when I screamed and woke up my mother and father,
Sorry.
they came out to see what was going on, and this figure was gone. And so a few nights later, of course, I went back upstairs to my room, and I was lying there asleep, or trying to go to sleep. It was a hot summer night, and I was sleeping at the end of my bed.
There was no AC back then.
Yeah, no AC. Had the window open, trying to get some air from the window, and I was kind of almost going to sleep, when all of a sudden, right above me, I heard something take 2 deep breaths. And I mean, it was right there. It was almost paralyzing. I couldn't move. And then, so that was my second encounter. I was probably about 19 years old when that happened. And then I wonder sometimes then to myself if it sometimes happens around death, because years later, now my other brother didn't die, but he was very, very ill and next to death, and he was in the hospital in Kettering. And by then, of course, I had a child and was married, and I was taking my mother to see my brother at the hospital late at night. And we were on our way back home late at night, and not many people were out on the road, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, kind of time frame. And my mother said, "Oh my God, look over there, look at that tall man." And I, glanced over, and sure enough, it was the man that I had remembered, this tall guy, with some kind of hat on that almost just looked dark and eerie. And I remember as we passed him, I looked back in my rearview mirror, and he was gone. My mom and I, proceeded, of course, toward her house, and we saw him yet again. And was like, how did he get up here? And still.
Oh, wait, you saw him again?
Yes,
on the road
as we were driving.
And you're sure it was the same man?
Yeah.
How are you sure?
To me, it was the same man. I mean, I had seen him before, so I knew it was him, and I couldn't figure out how he had gotten in front of us, and we were in a car. So it was almost magical,
farther?
Mysterious, probably 5 miles further down the road.
Wow.
And at that point, my mom and I looked at each other and said, if we see him again, we're not even going home. I don't know what we were going to do or what our plan was, but we were completely freaked out. So, and that was the last encounter, actually, that I personally had with him.
Now, what was he... Because this sounds like whoever he is, he followed you somehow. Because you said that you first saw him when you said 10?
Yeah, probably 10 years old.
And that was down in the holler in Kentucky on your great-grandpa's farm.
Just my grandpa's farm.
Oh, it was your... Okay, because he's my... Okay, and he was just staring at you.
He was just staring at us. But he stood there and he watched us and he knew we saw him and he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't leave. We left, actually, to tell our parents. It was just a very creepy, eerie feeling.
Did he do anything else?
I remember, I think, him tipping his hat. So, kind of like just so we knew, or to say hi, or he acknowledged us.
And, okay, so you saw him when you were 10. You think that you felt him again when you said like 19.
Right, 19. I actually saw him coming down the steps in my parents' house. And then I know, I don't know how I know this, but a few nights later, someone took 2 distinct deep breaths right over top of me, right at my face. And I knew it was him. But when I opened my eyes, of course, nothing was there.
Right. And then you said you saw him again on the road. Was he? Right. What was he doing on the road? Was he on the side of the road, or was he standing in the road? Or
he was on the side of the road walking. So, like he was traveling somewhere. He was going somewhere. And it was,
right.
Like I said, very late at night. So, I mean, he stood out, like a sore thumb. And something I remember about that time is, and I don't know if it was because it was dark or whatever, but he was almost in white clothing. But it was the same man. I know it was. And then, like I said, by the time we passed, I looked in my rear view, he was gone. Nowhere to be seen. So, it was very, very odd, very scary.
Did he, when you passed him on the road, did he acknowledge you like he did the...
He didn't. So...
Well, that's kind of disconcerting.
Yeah.
Because it sounds eerily similar to what Mike had, to what I was telling you about how Mike had seen this thing.
That's why it kind of freaked me out when you were telling me that.
Yeah. Well, he said that his aquarium light had caught fire, and he jumped up and shut it off. So I was wondering if anything like that had happened, to you guys, or...
Not really. I just know that the room that I used to sleep in, after seeing him when I was a teenager, more of a teenager,
mm-hmm.
It was like you would go into that room and you could almost feel or sense that someone was there, and nothing would really burn, but the light would shut off on its own. So, and it was a push-button, old-fashioned light. So, and it wasn't like the light bulb blew or anything like that. The actual button was in the opposite direction then. So,
wow.
Into the off position.
Is it easy to press those kinds of buttons?
No, it's not.
So,
They're hard.
So you don't think wind or...
Oh no, nothing like that could have pushed it.
No.
They're
Okay.
difficult to push. You got to push them hard till they click. So.
Okay. And could you hear the button being pressed when it went off, or was it just the light was off and then you looked and the button was off?
I think it was just that the light went off, and when I looked, I knew it was in the off position. So, but I don't recall hearing anything. So.
Are there any stories that your parents or,
Well, my parents used to talk about the guy, like I said, that was in Kentucky, and they didn't know what he was, but I do know that they were afraid of whatever it was we saw that day, that man, that object, what have you. And they would tell us, if you ever see him run, stay away, don't look at him, stuff like that.
Don't look at him.
Right. They said, don't look at him, he was evil.
And when you were 10, you were looking right at him?
We were. We looked right at him. I mean, we didn't know anything, we just thought it was a man.
Right.
So.
And then I guess when you told them, that's when they told you,
Right,
okay.
Exactly. Don't look at him, run, get somebody, run away. So, but when I was younger, I mean, there were several times when, while being in Kentucky, that we would see him from a distance.
So this was more than once?
And go the other way. Oh yeah, it happened a lot when I was really young. So, and I mean, adults were even afraid of whatever this was.
Really?
It was obvious, yeah.
So it sounds like everybody kind of knew.
Yeah, the adults knew, but they really weren't saying anything. They just said he was evil, to stay away from him, stuff like that. Odd things happened on my grandfather's farm anyway. I think it was because maybe he and his grandmother, my grandfather and his mother both, were apparently able to foresee the future, and they were able to help people who are suffering sometimes from illnesses, and stuff like that, especially involving fire or bleeding. They could, help them.
Involving fire?
Yeah, like if they had been burnt, stuff like that.
That kind of sounds like, and I'm not saying, don't think what I'm trying to say here is anything other than conjecture, because it's not, but Mike saw that guy and then his aquarium light caught fire.
Right.
So it almost seems like your grandpa had the opposite ability.
Right.
That he could kind of like heal
right.
fire. Do you think maybe that's why they were so like, he kind of hung around there, this dark man in that hat?
I don't know.
Do you think maybe he didn't like your grandfather because of that?
I don't know, but I know he was never on his property. We never ever saw him on my grandfather's property. He was always on someone else's property, a distance from us, but would let us know that he would make us aware of his presence. So, but he was never on his land.
Ever?
So.
Not even once?
No.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Anything else you want to add to this, or?
No, not that I can think of right now. But if I think of anything else, I'll let you know.
All right, and I'm going to do some research, so I'll let you know if anything turns up. Okay?
Okay. Thanks.
Hey, no problem.